Christian greetings. This is Randy Pike speaking. There's a verse in Philippians chapter 4 and verse 13. Now, anybody that stays half awake through church services have heard this verse somewhere down the road. And I want to talk to you about it briefly, but explain the background of the verse, which is continually missed. In Philippians 4:13, Paul said, I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. All things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. Now, I've been in many mission conferences, and I hear young people get up and say, I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. And then 6 months later, they're out of the ministry, they're back in whatever they did prior. Well, when Paul said, I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me, he names some of those things in the verses just before this. And let me read a few of them for you. In Philippians chapter 4 and verse 12, just before 13, Paul says, I know both how to be abased, or how to be down, and I know how to abound. I know how to be up high. Everywhere in all things I am instructed both to be full and to be empty, both to have and not have, is what he's saying. Isn't it interesting that Paul said, I have learned how to be on top, and I've learned how to be on the bottom. Through Christ, I can do that. He said, I know how to have plenty to eat and how to be on the verge of starvation. I have learned through Christ how to do that. Now, you who are watching this video, would you like to take a few lessons in being hungry, in not having, a few lessons in suffering and sorrow and hardship? Would you like maybe a 6 months course or a year's course or a 2 years course in that? Well, that's what made Paul the man of God and the missionary that he was. You know, Paul was so unique that God used him to write, listen to this, to write 14 of the 27 books of the New Testament. Man, that's over half of them. And he tells us the secret here to the Philippian church. Now, it's interesting, the church that he said that to. It's the Philippian church. Back in Acts 16, remember when Paul went to Philippi and he was thrown in prison and beaten, and the prisoners heard him and his companions singing at midnight. Now here's the church that knew all that, and Paul writes this letter about 8 years later back to this church, and he says, I want you to learn to do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth you. It's amazing today. People talk about they're going to do this for God, they're going to do that for God, and you let them lose their job and see what happens to them. Or you let one of their children come down with cancer, or their wife or husband leave them, and you see what it comes down to. Learning to do all things through Christ, who will strengthen us in anything that hits our life. Now that's how it is. We hear a lot of talk today about how God will bless you, you'll win the jackpot, and you'll be a millionaire. And listen, let me tell you, there's nothing wrong with having things. As I've told you before, if things don't have you. But here's the problem. Why do you want things? For the glory of God or the betterment of yourself? Remember, the theme is all things through Christ, which strengtheneth us. Now that's valid and it's true today if we're willing to sweat it out and fight it out right on the rest of life. I hope a few of these words will drop in your heart. Some of you are having a hard time. Some of you are struggling with things. Did it ever occur to you that God led you into this to make a better person out of you? Some of you maybe have been blessed with a lot. Did it ever occur to you that God led you into this to see what you would do with it for the glory of Christ and the furtherance and the speeding forth of the gospel? Well, that's my word in season for you today. That's my word in time. Take it in heart. Doing all things through Christ, which strengtheneth us. Sometimes that's shouting, sometimes that's crying. But Christ is in it, and it's a blessing. God, take that word and lay it into your heart, especially for days to come. Cheerio.